Everybody, welcome back to Advocacy Help Desk. We are a network of advocacy innovators and practitioners that are really trying to bring to you tips and best practices, especially now during this coronavirus crisis. Things are shifting very rapidly. We did this show. We've been doing digital tools and assets for over a year now as we tested these things out. And we did it to try to help the workflow, to help pull everybody into this age by actually doing this show, in studio with our producer, Blake. He is killing it right now. There's so many people trying to do podcasts and video, so he can't join us today. But Brian, it's one of those things where all of a sudden people are thrust into this, and we need to, we're doing this over Zoom, so we're not in studio, so we're adapting. But the challenge is trying to sort through what this all means and where this is all headed, right?
I mean, you're spot on, Andy. One is it's been great because we've been touching on all these different topics of what associations should be doing for a while now with regards to trying new tools, seeing what happens. And it just happens that right now it overlaps, right? These new tools that we've been playing with, virtual reality, Zoom, and podcasts and everything else that have been around, but we've been working on them, are now the center point of everybody's strategy. And so, but with that comes, are associations ready to make that change, right? Are they ready to take that next step and say, what can we do differently today to make us better in the future and make sure that we, I don't want to say survive, but last through this to that next step? Yeah,
exactly. And the problem is, where you could plan things out and try to, say, okay, over 3 months, we're going to test these tools out. Now you got 3 days to test out tools.
Right.
People, aren't necessarily prepared because I think the challenge is really around workflow. So, around that, let's talk a little bit about what this means right now, and let's talk about what it means for the future. So who's on the help desk today to help us out?
We got in the studio, Mr. Tommy Goodwin, a very good friend and actually a very impressive expert in the area. The man has been doing this for quite some time, and it's always a pleasure to talk to him. So, Tommy, it's great to have you. I thought we were going to do a Men in Blazers kind of thing today, so I brought the blazer. But no, Zoom is all about, and this is especially about taking it easy. But, Tommy, tell us a little bit about sort of the work that you're doing now. I mean, your organization that you work with, you're taking the gospel and spreading it across the world. Frankly, I've seen your photos from everywhere and in between. But tell us a little bit about some of the work you're doing now, and then we're going to get into what should associations be doing soon or now too.
Yeah, gentlemen, I appreciate you having me here today. I ditched the blazer. I was going to try to keep all the soccer references to a minimum. Otherwise, this thing might go a couple hours and we'll lose everybody listening. But no, it's great to be here. So I have the pleasure of heading up government relations and legislative affairs for Project Management Institute here in the U.S. And we actually do quite a bit of work around the world too. And so what we do is try to take and represent, our community. We've got nearly 500,000 members here in the U.S. We certify more than 1 million people around the world, and it's all about project management best practices, whether it's the people dropping the latest operating system in your phone or people who are doing these big, massive infrastructure projects people are talking about today, or some of the people who are leading some of the COVID-19 response. It's about how do you take those big projects with big schedules, big scopes, big timelines, big budgets, and deliver them on time and on budget. That's what project management's all about. And you think about the government and you think about some of what we've got going around COVID-19. I mean, these projects, making sure they're done and getting people and communities the services they need. I mean, it's never been more important, right? So PMI, what we're doing is we're talking to policymakers and trying to figure out how we can be helpful, how we can play a constructive role, and making sure that as governments, both here in the US and the States and around the world, are trying to figure their way out of this, both in terms of their near-term response and trying to mitigate this crisis, but also thinking about how we get everybody back to work and how we jumpstart the economy after this. We're trying to be there and be a resource for people during these difficult times. So it's a lot of work. There's a lot going on, both here in the States and elsewhere. But nowhere I'd rather be. We're really trying to help, and it's a great position to be in.
I love it. The work you guys do is fantastic with regards to, you're right. A lot of people just think about, well, here are the resources, now what, right? And they don't think about all the project management and all the pieces and processes and everything else that needs to go into actually making something happen. And so that's really what you guys are all about on a day-to-day basis, but especially now with this unprecedented time we live in terms of, great, there is a response, but there has to be somebody that makes sure that it gets from A to B and A to Z, and not just, great, here's everything, run with it, because that doesn't work.
No, and that's the big challenge we're trying to solve for, right? The big foundation of our advocacy platform is that basically the numbers we quantify every year how much money goes to waste on projects and programs. And this year in 2020, we found it's about 11.4%. And so what that means in the way we talk in Washington is that's $114 million for every $1 billion goes out the door. Those are schedule delays, those are cost overruns. And if you think about the scale of what we're doing right now around COVID-19, but also how urgent those projects and programs are, right? Those need to be nailed in a way that's as efficient and effective as possible to get people what they need. And that's where we kind of come in and say, hey, we're here from the experts. How can we be of service? How can we help?
That's interesting. Yeah. How do you think this applies to advocacy in the same way? Because the way I think about it is the challenges that people have are that the tools that we're all using have been around. Zoom's been around for a couple of years. Other platforms have been around for years. I think the challenge that people have is around that management side, is the workflow issues. It's that people try to hop on and they try to accelerate and figure things out really quickly. And I always try to tell people, be a little bit more methodical about what you're doing, be thoughtful about it. Don't just jump in and with technology, you got to do a lot of beta testing, I think, and figuring out workflows and synchronization, right? Like, so we're all trying to figure out how we're working in our homes, but we also have to think about how we're synchronizing with our colleagues in order to bring our workflows even higher and get more productivity across our organizations.
Yeah, I mean, how many articles do we read? How many conversations do we see in all the business publications? What do they talk about? They talk about agile, right? And some people think agile is just like hurrying up and doing stuff and then figuring it out later. It's like, no, there's some methodology around that, right? We're kind of in this new environment. PMI, we're, as a global association, we've got people around the world, so this remote work idea is not new to us. And our leadership and our CEO was on the front end of making sure people around the world were safe. So we've been doing this for a little while as part of this crisis. But the idea of remote lobbying, remote advocacy, this is to your point, Andy. It's kind of new. And what do we need to do? We actually need to think strategically about it. Because to your point, there's a lot going on right now. You've got organizations and associations who are trying to figure out the immediate response. You've got these stimulus packages going around. They want to throw all their efforts into that. But it's like, okay, well, what else is there? What else can you be doing during this time? Because Congress doesn't press the pause button very often. Governments around the world don't press the pause button. And now we've got this opportunity where, for the first time, we've got a little bit of breathing room right now to sit there and take a step back and think, it's like, okay, how do we make the program better? How do we advocate better? What new tools do we think about? What scared us a couple of weeks ago that we need to go back and think about? And it's almost this unprecedented moment to, we're still building the plane and flying the plane at the same time. But at least for the next few weeks, we've got a little bit of pressure released. And it's like, okay, how do we come out of this better and different than when we started?
So what are you seeing from, I love that insight. What are you seeing from those associations or those groups that are doing it right? I mean, it is, it's unprecedented times. Folks are unsure or unable or unwilling, right? And now they've, as Andy said, they've been thrust into this. What are you seeing that what are the first steps that folks are taking or could be taking that they're doing in the right way?
So I think what's interesting about what we're seeing right now is what happened over the last couple of weeks and some of the activity and some of the scrum around that is really, I don't know that advocacy is fundamentally different, right? It's about two things. It's about information. It's about relationships. And so when you think about information, what you were looking for is the information coming into you from the Hill or from the States or wherever it is, and making sure you get the right kind of information to be able to make your strategies and your strategic decisions the right way and position what your legislative solutions are, whether you're looking for money because my industry is going under and if I don't get some government support, we're done, or organizations who are just looking to sort of help and make some improvements here. But right, you need that information flow into you to make the right strategic decisions. But then you also have to think about what the information going out to your members is. What's the right cadence? What do they need to do their jobs? You know, Andy, I know with the footwear distributors, you're out there all the time, right? Your people are making decisions in real time. You've got organizations that are making huge, high dollar decisions that impact jobs and everything. Those people need a lot of information about this. If you're in a professional association, do you need as much information about what's going on the Hill, or do you need to communicate about, hey, we understand what's going on, we're keeping an eye on this, but here's how we can help you as a member or you as a stakeholder differently, right? And that's what it is. It's around, I think the organizations who are doing this right are both leveraging those information flows from an advocacy standpoint, but they're also thinking about advocacy in a little bit of a different way. They're thinking about how they can be advocates for their members right now. They're thinking about how organizationally they can add value, what they can do to make sure that they're taking care of your members during this time. If you're an association that's out there sending a dues notice saying, hey, I need you to re-up right now, and if not, we might be shedding some employees, oh boy, that's not a place in the world you want to be. You want to be in a place where, hey, we understand the pain you're going through. We're here to be your advocate. We're here to support you, whether that's in front of the government or in front of your computer screen. And that's where I think the information flows are important. And it's also still about relationships, right? It's still about, you know, making sure that you can leverage those relationships. Are you getting the information you need? Are you able to communicate with your stakeholders, whether that's your members to get them engaged, or, you know, your folks on the Hill? Are you still able to do that? You know, are you being able to convert people over to Zoom calls and WebEx calls and getting those information flows? Because, you know, a lot of people in my world, you know, it's shoe leather, it's knocking on doors, it's walking the halls. And, you know, when that dries up, are you still able to have those, you know, conversations? Are you still having opportunities to communicate? And then I think to Andy and your point earlier, it's like, well, how are you leveraging new tactics, right? How are you bringing Zoom into this? How are you connecting your members to policymakers to think about this conversation in new and different ways that might become the new normal after this?
I think it is the new normal. I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges I see for association leadership, and I haven't been shy of sharing my opinions. Some people may not like them. That's okay. I'm a practitioner. I don't care. Brian has to be diplomatic on the show, so he's the diplomat. I'm the bomb thrower. Tommy can join me in throwing bombs. But in one interview, I said public affairs is 20 years behind corporations in terms of how they talk to their consumer base, their users. You know, when we talk about these tools that we all have, people in public affairs continually misuse them. They don't understand them. I think there's a difference between posting and actually engaging. So we post on Facebook, we tweet, we do all this stuff. And it's like, but you're using the same message you did from 1980. It's a different platform and people consume it differently on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. All those platforms, if you send out the same message, you're just posting. You're not actually connecting. You're not actually educating. People aren't. It's an awareness thing. It's almost like you check the box that, oh, we did this, you know, we're so active, like, great. Like, what does that even mean? If people aren't reading it, engaging with it, what are you doing? So I think that's one thing that I'm concerned about. The other thing I'm concerned about is that association executives are not prepared for this. I think they are thinking about crisis management, and I'm thinking new world. I'm thinking new models. New workflows. So I think about it in terms of human resources. So I'm thinking about how our teams are all remote and do we need office space? I'm thinking, you know, and some people may think that's radical, but do we need office space? And there's a lot of associations that have invested millions of dollars in office space. And in terms of that, on that radical thought, I also think, do we have the ability now to capture really unique talent across the country to help us. Mm-hmm. And we're so stuck with this idea that they got to sit next to us in an office and they got to be in DC. And there are huge opportunities if you can think a little bit differently than what we are. But this thing where we're going to get through this and we're going to manage this crisis and we're going to come out, we'll be stronger. And it's like, you're only going to be stronger if you don't think you can manage this. You're only going to be stronger if you think about changing your models in HR, in your talent, in your tools, and your platforms, and how you're doing things. And then Tommy, I'll let you riff on this too, because you know you and I have been talking about this. But I do think if people want to understand why I'm thinking this way, the best way I can describe it is we've been in a digital age for the past 15, 20 years, something like that. You know, and it's been going this way as we all start using digital tools and assets. And I think the iPhone really thrust us forward in many ways. But we're hitting the point now where we're into a mature digital age to a point of visual age. So we obviously all the memes going, all the Zoom, all these things, right? So I think of it as a visual age. And I still think a lot of people in advocacy are using copy and text and bullet points and all that. And where we're headed after this, and we're accelerating so quickly now because of this, is to the virtual age. So digital age challenge was associations didn't do digital very well. We're in a visual age. People are trying to figure that out, but they're trying to figure out the visual, and they're not even thinking about the virtual, and it's coming really quickly. And that's my concern, is successful people coming out of this are thinking in those terms and preparing in those terms. And the people who don't are going to be in the same spot they've been in for 10 years, and their membership's declining and their revenues are declining, and they can't figure out why. Tommy.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. No, but I mean, so think about what's the old adage? Never let a crisis go to waste, right? We've had a crisis. And if you're in this field, the last thing you should do is come out of this crisis at the end the exact same way you went in. Because then you've truly wasted the opportunity. Because to your point, if you've done things a certain way over time and you've wondered, and it's always been in the back of your head, like, hey, I see this Andy guy talks about video a lot. I mean, a lot. But, his organization's really doing a lot around this. I wonder if we could do this. Well, this is the perfect time to experiment, right? If you're heading up an advocacy program right now, there are basically two kinds of projects you should be looking at. One is, at some point, if you were involved in the phase 3 response, for example, for COVID-19, there's some moment in that thing where you sat there and took a really deep breath when you were ready to talk to somebody, or you were sending an email to your CEO, like, oh boy, I hope this holds up. Whether it was, hey, we've been priming our grassroots for a while and we're really trying to get them engaged, and man, I hope they come through this time. Or, we've got this consultant up on the hill and I really hope he or she comes through for us. Whatever that was that gave you pause during that moment, or like, man, I hope he doesn't ask about that. Project set number 1, fix those problems.
That's
Work
great.
on them,
That's
invest
great.
in them, think about what they are, because there was something probably for everybody, no matter how mature your program was, that gave you some level of pause. Bucket number
I'm writing this
1,
down, Tommy.
Focus on those, right?
I love
Think about what those are. The second part is the proactive part, right? So I see Andy's doing video. I see the footwear distributors are really heavy into this. I wonder if we could do this. Great, you've got a couple weeks. Put something out there. Do one thing that's uncomfortable and figure out what that is. See how your members respond to it. It could completely go over. It could completely fail. But test, learn, figure it out, rapid iteration. And if it works for you, do it. If it doesn't work for you, drop it. But here's the perfect opportunity to be able to do that. And, how are you investing in the program going forward? Let's say I've got a great platform like Spark Influence, right? But I haven't really gotten in under the analytics side of it, right? I haven't dug into figure out what's my real open rate? What's my effective response rate? Hey, I wonder if there are 100 people who respond to everything we do, that we can move up that engagement pyramid and that loyalty ladder and turn them into our real, true blue advocates. Okay, it's something I've always wanted to do, but man, we just haven't had the time. You now have a little bit of time. And so you can think about, what you do during this pause, Andy, to your point, about making sure that you're different coming out than you're coming in, because there are a lot of organizations, not just associations, a lot of organizations in general, who started their digital transformation 2 weeks ago. And those organizations are in a lot of trouble. They're behind the curve. And I think to your point on, the end of what our organizations are doing, right? We want people to see that we're truly adding value for them. We want them to see that we're there for them during this difficult time. Because if not, people are going to see the value start to diminish. And, if particularly in the professional association side, or if you're in kind of an individual customer association or organization, right? I don't want to resell what we're doing every single time, right? I never want to send out a membership notice or an advocacy email if I'm an organization and have someone sort of go through this rational decision-making process each time. I don't want them doing a cost benefit of whether they should send in the check. I don't want them to think about, okay, is the work I'm doing really, do lawmakers really listen? I don't want that to happen, right? I want to be in this emotional spot where my organization is fighting for me. And when the renewal notice comes through, I click it, I send it, I don't even think about it, right? Email comes through, boom, done, right? It's finished, right? That's when you're in that sort of wonderful sweet spot that people know they're getting value. People know that their organization is fighting for them. And, we're in this environment where it's going to be very interesting to see how different organizations approach that, right? Because I think, at least in the association space anyway, I, for a long time, have thought we're in the front end of mergers and acquisitions and closures. And we've seen some of it happen over the last couple of years, but this is just going to exacerbate that, right? People are going to be under a revenue crunch. People are going to be challenged. And it's really about, okay, how am I delivering value? And it's difficult to do in an environment where, if you think about the traditional association model, and I worked at AARP for 10 years, right? We perfected it there. It's right. We get everything from your information, your advocacy, your products and services, your discounts. It's all in one spot. It's like, well, technology disrupted that, Andy. It's like you said, the iPhone killed that model. And so what are people doing, right? They're going to be looking more towards what advocacy is delivering for them. And really, what can my organization do in the States, in Washington, D.C., around the world to make sure that, my interests are being looked after? And oh, by the way, we're doing that at a time where it's way harder to accomplish actual legislative victories than it's ever been. And so it's almost kind of creates this vice for organizations where it's like, all right, a lot of the member value parts of my value proposition have been disrupted. And so people are now looking at the advocacy ones. You've got to make sure you're sharpening the saw. You've got to make sure you're continuing to get better every day, because if not, how do you manage that pressure? How does your organization survive that? And I think that's what, unfortunately, we're going to see a lot of probably in the months and years ahead is there are going to be lots of organizations under pressure.
I completely agree. Brian, what I think Tommy's talking about here is what we've been talking about for a long time, and you can riff on this, but we're talking about branding versus selling a service. There's a lot of people out there selling a service, and Tommy's talking about emotional attachment. So when I talked about, public affairs is 20 years behind, that's what brands do. They have an emotional attachment. That's why you keep buying Nike product. You have some idea of its value, but you just keep buying it, right? You're loyal in some way.
Yeah.
That's branding, right? And we have a huge opportunity now to focus on branding instead of selling the service.
Well, I think, Tommy, you're absolutely right with those pieces, and Andy, you are too with this concept I love some of these things. I've written them all down. We're going to be bullet pointing them out in our posts when we put this up there, but it's great. Never let a crisis go to waste. Fix that one pause, right? That's a great statement right there. I really like that statement because you're absolutely right. 2 weeks ago when we were doing this phase 3 bill, we saw the most activity that we've ever had over the course of 7 days. We had one client that managed to generate 450,000 letters to the Hill, phone calls, tweets, everything, from 125,000 new people, not just people in their database,
wow,
but people that weren't in their database, new people. So it is this piece of what is that one pause? And it's something that we talk about a lot with our clients too. It's not just what does success look like, right? That's always a good question to ask of clients of anyone is what does success look like? But the flip side, what does failure look like too, right? And not enough associations are thinking that. They are now, right? Or they should be, the effective ones. But you're spot on with that statement you said, which is like when both the internal, what's that pause that we just had, right? Where did I go? Where am I not sure? Let me solidify that. And the flip side is you're exactly right when it comes to that branding for the renewal time, right? What are the pauses, the same pauses, but what are the pauses? Where do we fail with renewals, right? Is it that we're not providing member value? Is it that we're not forward thinking? Is it that they don't believe that we're their voice in Washington? Is it that X, Y, and Z, right? What are those pauses? What are those failure points? Now is the time to send out, and we've been talking to our clients about this a lot, a simple 2-question questionnaire or 3-question questionnaire of, what can we be doing on your behalf right now? Here's what we're doing. Is there anything we're missing? And then the flip side too is maybe you're busy. Maybe you have a family member that's sick. Maybe you have 5 kids running around, or you just aren't as ingrained as you want to be. Then it's that same concept you were talking about a minute ago of we need to be there for you when you're ready, when you're back, when that time is when you can come back. And how do we do that? It's with that branding piece that you guys both have been talking about, which is now is the time for us to be the center point of information for folks about our industry. We were just talking to the city planners the other day. There's an opportunity here for them to really take through from start to finish. Well, what do cities look like when this is done or as we move through this, right? What are the things that we can be talking about? Because whether I'm in the middle of this or not, my passion is still city planning. I want to be thinking about this with regards to city planning. So how does that association then talk to me in that way? Because my passion about city planning doesn't go away just because of all of this going around me. And I may be fed up with some of the news that I'm hearing, or I may be tiring of some of the press conferences and other things. Let me get those things at what FDRA is doing, which is a great example of branding at this point, which is just telling the message, you know, the quick voice hits on Amazon Echoes, the quick videos on YouTube. There are new ways to embrace what's going on out there that's simple and easy, but provides the information in only the way we know how to those folks that are passionate about what we're doing. They've made it their livelihood. Let's talk to them and expand our concentric circles out in a time of need when folks are looking for those kind of things.
And let me add one other bucket of things that I think we should be considering right now, because I think, Brian, you and Andy have talked about a lot of these digital opportunities, a lot of this new work you can be doing. I think we should also take a minute and take a step back and say, what should we stop doing? What have we been doing for the last 20 years that we just keep doing to do it? And let's use this crisis as an opportunity to pivot away from that, right? Andy riffs about video. One of my longstanding riffs is fly-ins. I just do not understand why the standard spring fly-in in Washington, D.C. is still done. They're dinosaurs. You should be able to see them in the Smithsonian. I just don't understand them, right? Because particularly for associations, right, they are a lot of work. They are incredibly costly. I think it was Congressional Management Foundation and ASA used to do this benchmarking research every year. It stopped doing it years ago, I believe. But I think the last thing I saw was like the average fly-in for an association was $101,000. So let's add some inflation on top of that. Let's figure it's $125,000. I don't care if I'm running a 6-figure program or a 9-figure program. If I'm pushing $125,000 in the middle of the table, I want some return on that, right? I want to make sure that's an investment that pays off. And unfortunately, fly-ins are really member value activities. They're not advocacy activities, right? Everybody gets their picture and their grip and grin with a member of Congress. But okay, why do I need to bring people to Washington, D.C. to do that? Why do I need to bring them in to have these conversations? You think about Andy, what Andy's talking about Zoom. Like, we've seen these tweets going around where members of Congress are doing Zoom chats right now. For those for whom that becomes the normal, I don't want to bring people into a single place and have them have like a 10-minute conversation where we take a picture and then people read their talking points around the room, and then by the time we can actually get to a conversation, the meeting's over. Versus, hey, I've got a member of Congress being driven from an event in one part of the district to another part of the district. They have 35 minutes in the backseat of a car with literally nothing to do. I want to put a phone with my advocates in front of them and have a much richer, much more memorable, much more focused conversation where they don't have 8 other things they should be doing right now. They're not being pulled in 6 different directions. Do I need to be doing call time right now? Do I need to be in a committee, right? I'm stuck here. I'm here. I'm focused. I'm hearing your message. And that can be so much more impactful without really going to the trouble of all the logistics for less return. That's just one example of things that we should be thinking about. Why are we still doing this? What can we do that's more, better, or different around that?
I completely agree. I mean, it's an issue of effectiveness, right? It's an issue of, are we actually moving the dial by having meetings on the Hill with staffers where we get our cadence down, we get our talking points down, we have that meeting, we check it off. It's another tick list. It's another checkpoint, you know.
We did 250 meetings this time. Woo! To what end? What did you accomplish?
All right, so
what
devil's advocate.
Changed?
All right. I get it. I understand. Devil's advocate, though, says that in-person ability to and I don't think it's just in person. I think that that's been the crutch word forever, but it's always been ability to convey how a specific piece of legislation or decision will impact me personally in your district, right? So I think it's not killing the essence of the fly-in, right? It's just killing the in-person aspect of it. Because Andy, you went on it brilliantly with your small-time shoemaker from out of town who couldn't be here, who couldn't fly in. And what I loved about that video too was not just him talking about what he's doing, but seeing the home office behind him where you were able to see the Post-it notes of what his work entails, the small shoe mold in the back, so it's not just bringing the props and dressing up and doing everything and being there in DC for the meeting. It's conveying the importance of the work that I'm doing and why it means something. And the visual cues that you get from Zoom are almost better than the in-person visual cues that you get from being in DC and flying in and, pressing the flesh, which isn't maybe never going to be a thing again. We don't really know. But I think that you guys are spot on. It's not killing the fly-in, it's killing the in-person piece of it to make it more effective in the long run.
It's about thinking differently about it, right? It's about just taking a step back and saying, okay, is this really the best tactic to get us from point A to point B from a policy change perspective? And fly-ins do have a lot of value in that. To your point, it lets people share their stories. They want the realness, right? People, as you know, without proper advocate training, a lot of times people go up to the hill and they're very uncomfortable. It's very difficult for them to tell their story. But in a virtual environment where people can pick up on those cues and they can understand, okay, hey, this is what somebody in my industry is going through. This is what their world really looks like. People can kind of put themselves there and they can see it. And you also want fly-ins and you want grassroots advocacy and you want some of the traditional levers we have because it helps build the grass tops, right? It helps build our key contacts. And if I think one of the things we learned over, the crisis over the last couple of weeks is in times like this, decisions on Capitol Hill or in state houses or in legislatures around the world are made by fewer and fewer people. Mm-hmm. And you want people who are able to break through the traditional noise. And you're not going to identify who your grass tops leaders are if you're not bringing them through your grassroots process to begin with. And the fly-ins are part of that. But you do want to build those leader-to-leader capabilities, and that's a way to do it. Find out who the people who want to, get on these regular chats, or who are always there, and who are able to say, or the member of Congress picks them out. It's like, oh, hey, that's Andy. I remember you from so and so. Bingo, right? That's something you can pursue. And I think David Lusk did an article about this that's floating around on LinkedIn called Advocacy from Afar that I think he's done a really good job of laying out why doing some of these traditional advocacy matters differently helps position you better for the future. And, Brian, to your work, you need good data and records to be able to find these people, right? You need to be able to track who are your engaged advocates, who are the people you can continue to grow in that thing. And that's why you need a platform like yours to be able to do it. So it all works together.
Well, I always appreciate that plug.
But think differently.
But I think, all right, so let's get into the nitty gritty then. So I'll give 3 things that organizations are doing effectively, and you guys can do your own and expound on them and take it on. What we're seeing is 1, data audits. You're absolutely right? Now is the time to say, okay, great. When was the last time we saw what our list means, who's in it, anything we can do to better understand who these people are? And not just that, it's who do we want to contact? Who is our biggest person? If I create what we call models or I create personas, right? Who are the people that are most likely to do X? Who are the people that are most likely to do Y? Literally, we have clients and we've walked them through it on whiteboards at home right now who are putting up, I think that X type of person is the person that's going to be our most effective person in the future. I think that Y type. So they're building little personas of it. Data audits are absolutely in there. And with that then comes grass tops too. You're absolutely right, is how can we better understand who are the people we have in our database and do they have relationships with legislators? Are they very active, right? So grass tops and the third part is combining those two, building that engagement ladder of where the heck are the people that we're talking about. So it's not just who are the type of people that we think are going to take the most action. Now let's take that understanding and apply it to the data that we have to better understand what we can do. So of course, always we say this, look, letters, phone calls, tweets, etc., but it's about the people behind it and part of your community that make up what your effort is about. So when we talk about, and I'm looking at my notes again with what you just said, where do we fail, right? Those are the questions that we're asking groups right now, and they're starting to do more in-person thinking with that kind of thing. So those are some of the 3 things. And of course, I'm not going to jump on the Zoom boat, but we've seen that take off exponentially with groups, with things like this, with advocate meetings, with advocate champion meetings, et cetera. So I'm going to pass the baton over to Andy. Tell me 3 things you think associations could be doing right now, just easy, low lifts, right? But getting something done to make them better in the future.
Yeah, you put me on the spot because you had your list ready and I didn't. So I think I'm quick on my feet. I think, first of all, people need to realize we are in an age of huge opportunity. So as scary as everything is, I actually believe, and I'm lucky because I've been working on this digital and visual world for 3 years now. I'm preparing for it. But I really believe it's a huge opportunity to expand our base. So when you're running letter campaigns, you're getting all that data in. We're a small association. So the worst part of my job is managing that database. And now all of a sudden, because all these people are sending in these letters, I'm capturing all that new data in. I'm replacing their old, because they may have left jobs, they may have left companies. How do I keep up with all that? How do I keep up with them? All of a sudden, I'm getting in thousands and thousands of new records to rebuild my role. So we talk about, to Tommy's point, I'm going to invoice and I need to get all this. No. Now is the actual time, to your point, Brian, to use a good system like Spark Influence to get all that data in, start targeting, see where everything is, get organized, but expand the base, right? Expand the value.
Right.
So that's one thing is think strategically about your expansion right now and capturing as much data and as many people as possible. Not charging, or obviously you'll figure out your revenue, but like that's one thing. I think people need to think about, I guess my thoughts are more strategic focus, but I've been saying this for a long time around branding. The value that we provide people right now is that we are in essence government and business media. So you need to think about your organization as a media organization. And part of that is, I think newsletters are always important on technical things, but equally important is taking government speak and breaking it down so common people can understand it.
Right.
That's why we do video, because I can do it extremely quickly. It's very effective. We still tweet, we still post on Facebook, we do all that stuff. Yes. But I think the other thing is, and Tommy said earlier, our members for years have been working on agility in supply chains. What's the flexibility? It's not just speed. It's not just mitigating risk. It's like, okay, this went out. Don't worry, we already have that game plan in, so we're going to implement this really quickly and not miss a beat. The struggle that associations and advocacy people have had in the digital world is they didn't update their workflows. They didn't understand their audiences. They didn't understand the tools. And so I think, the challenge that we're going to have is just like they digitized their bureaucracy. So that same thing they were doing in 1980,
Right.
They digitized that whole process of so-and-so's got to check off on this, and we got to do this, and we got to do that. Now is the time to figure out and to reevaluate your digital workflow, because it's going to go visual now and it's going to go virtual, and that's going to change. And the name of the game is speed. And you want to be as accurate as possible, but you don't need to be perfect. And my newest thing is being vulnerable to make a mistake. People are going to forgive you. It's about being really good right now, not being perfect. And I think people are struggling because they want to script everything out, and they think everything that they put out, you can't have an in it. You can't stutter. I stutter. I trip over words. It's fine. It humanizes me. It actually is a benefit. And DC is the worst about wearing ties and being buttoned down. And I think people need to ditch the tie and be themselves, and really part of our brand of associations. We are the associations. It's the people. It's not the logo. It's us. And people need to trust us. And we've got to turn on our video feeds and talk to our advocates. They got to see our face. They got to know we're here. There's a trust and comfort to that. So that's a couple of different things I'm just thinking of, but I'm so concerned that people continually digitize their bureaucracy from the physical to the digital world, and it doesn't work in this world. You can't have 5 people check off on one video. I can get this video out in 30 minutes because I don't have a bureaucracy that says this. This is a great conversation. The content is king. I don't need everything to look perfect. I don't look perfect, obviously. My wife tells me that all the time. So, but that's my biggest concern, is that people need to drop this 5-list checklist, and we need to get around this idea of Tommy's going to cut a video today and it's going to be on this, and these are the topics we agree on. And then as soon as he's done, we're going to produce it and we're going to pop it up, and as long as the content's correct and he didn't make a mistake and say HR 472 instead of HR 8, 9, 10, fine. And if he did, you just ditch it out. But we're going to post it. We're going to be very quick. We're going to give people, we're going to empower people. That's what we don't do very well in advocacy. We have these tiers and structures and meritocracy. We call it meritocracies, but really it's like a caste system in some ways. And sorry, I keep going, but
that's okay. I was just taking a photo so that I can post it to Twitter later, though. It's this kind of interaction, though, exactly what we're talking about.
We need to empower people, and we need to say, here's what your role is, and when it comes to you, do it as quickly and as efficiently as possible. We're telling all our employees to do interviews with industry leaders. So it's not just me or Matt, my boss, it's everybody. It's like, get out there and do something and build your brand, because building your brand builds our brand. And it doesn't matter who gets the credit, because we're all in a tough spot right now. So it's expansion right now. Everybody's thinking about contraction. I'm thinking expansion. I'm thinking new tools, new resources, new workflows. And as I do that, I'm thinking, how can we do this really fast and efficiently and be very good, but not perfect? So
I
that's
like
what
it.
I'm thinking about right now.
I like it. All right, Tommy, you're up. 3 things that you're thinking about that associations could be doing better, and maybe a couple that you think they should ditch, right?
Yeah, so I think when you take what you gentlemen just put out there in terms of how organizations are organized internally and the types of really foundational elements of their programs that they have, it's like, think about how that manifests itself externally right now. And what Andy and Brian, which you guys just talked about, it's like, this question that associations need to be asking externally right now is, how can we help, right? If you're going to policymakers right now, what can we do to be of service to you? How can our community, how can the people we represent, how can this industry add value? How can we get people back to work? How can we help to restart this economy? How can we contribute to mitigating this pandemic, right? And knowing your organization and knowing what you have to offer and knowing how to, getting that constant feedback from folks on the Hill, from staffers who are now all doing meetings in hoodies. Like, forget the Brooks Brothers suit, like the official uniform of Capitol Hill right now is a hoodie. I don't know if I've had a Zoom chat in 2 weeks with somebody who was not wearing a hoodie. That's just where we're at right now. It's fantastic. It's evolution, right? But you want to be helpful, right? Your organization wants to be perceived externally in terms of how it can help. And that's with the Hill, that's with your members, right? How are you helping your members during this time, whether it's organizational members or whether it's individuals? And I'll give you an example of what we're doing at PMI. We put a microsite together. It's pmi.org/resources, where everybody in the project management community can go. We've got a whole list of free things. We've had some products that we've been beta testing for small audiences. We're now beta testing them for hundreds of thousands. It's all free. It's all out there. Sharpen the saw. Here are some community resources. If you find yourself, displaced in your job, here are some resources here that can help you. It's all free. It's all out there. We're not thinking about revenue. We're not thinking about charging. We want to be helpful because it's all about your planting seeds, right? Whether it's with lawmakers, whether it's with your members, whether it's with just the community at large, right? Organizations and associations who are going to thrive are really trying to think about what they can do to be of service right now, and not necessarily thinking about, oh goodness, we're seeing a 10% drop in revenue, or to Andy's point, how do we keep up this same infrastructure and the same bureaucracy when we're all working remotely and we can't stand in each other's doorways, right? It's figuring out how you can be of service in that world. And then Andy, you nailed it on the branding side. So how do you communicate that? How do you communicate that properly to policymakers to show that, this is different and we're trying to think about things differently? How do you talk to your members in an advocacy way that gets them to think about all the great work that you guys are doing? And then how do you show up to the community at large? What are you doing to help? How are we telling the stories of our members that are out there helping hospitals right now, that are going to be helping with long-term recovery, to let people know, hey, this is something we're all going through together. We're shoulder to shoulder with you all, and we're all going to come out of this on the other side. And if you're doing that and you're communicating that effectively, that's going to set you up for success in the future. Yeah, you might feel a little bit of twinge of pain in the near term, but it's all about that whole notion of, these people are fighting for me. And whoever you're talking to needs to feel that. And if you've got your systems in place and your processes and you're able to be nimble to be able to execute against that, that's going to hold you in really, really good stead in the long term.
And I would say too, to add to that, to folks out there watching and thinking through and listening to us, it really does come down to a mental state of believing that, we're in this spot. It's radical acceptance. It is what it is, but digital and virtual tools can be more effective than what we've been doing. You can really move the dial. So if you have that belief and you have the attitude and you're thinking differently than you did 3 weeks ago, you can figure out the tools. You can figure out the workflow. We're doing these things to help kind of change attitudes, beliefs, mindsets. We've been doing other things. We've got workflow sheets on how you do a Zoom, how you brand. If you want to know how do I brand, we've got a workflow sheet for that does video very quickly for free. You can do quick videos for free for your members or to send to Capitol Hill, whatever it is. There's these tools we can all figure out. We're here to help. But you got to have that mindset and you got to be thinking a little bit differently, right, Brian? And I know we're short on time. We're about to edge out, but I do think, I am worried for a lot of associations that have been doing the same thing forever. And that's a warning to all of us that, we need to think differently. We need to act a little bit differently. We need, the new tools will be there, but you gotta know how to use those tools, be a little bit more methodical. I think it's great that we had Tommy come on and talk about that, because from a project perspective, that's really what it is. We have a lot of new projects we need to be working on right now, and there's workflow and strategy to those things. But there's also the agility aspect of, how do we not digitize bureaucracy? How do we change what we're doing internally, and who's doing what internally?
Well, you guys crushed it. You guys crushed it today. I mean, I've got a page full of notes here on, never let a crisis go to waste, fix the pauses, do one thing that's uncomfortable to you, do the audits you need to do. Where are the possible I mean, I could go on, right? We're going to have this all online. Tommy, I want to thank you for today. As always, I love grabbing coffee, lunch, etc. with you, because you have such great insight on all these things. And so this concept of the processes that you guys put in place on a larger level for PMI, we need to be thinking about that just in general as association executives, as professionals in the arena. What can we do, and what are the pieces that we want to keep? I mean, it's great. And the branding piece, now is the time to not be afraid to get your name out there, because you're right. How can we help? I love that question. That's exactly right. And it goes and it applies in 5 or 6 different places, right? How can we help the legislator, the elected official, the staffer, our membership, all of those things? That's what we need to be seen as the person who's there to help now. And then in the future, that will just continue if we do it right. I love it. I love it. Andy, why don't you take us out? This was fantastic. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah,
thank you, gentlemen.
And I was just thinking too, like to that point, what would be genius is if you send an email out, the subject line is, how can we help? And in the body, it's just one sentence, we're listening. Nothing else. Nothing else. And see what you get back, because you're going to get a lot back. And it'd be more effective than trying to lecture people and talk to people that way. I think that'd be hugely effective. I love that. Just trying something different in this environment. Somebody would be shocked to say, oh my gosh, that's great. You would get the response. Anyway, I do on the fly. I always do these things. Advocacy Help Desk is a network of advocacy innovators and practitioners who've been doing this for a long time. The whole goal of this show is to help people. Today, part of it is helping think a little bit differently, changing mindsets, thinking a little bit about processes, thinking a little bit about the future and preparing for it, things you could do now, things you should think of later. If you have ideas for future shows, if you're having a problem, we talk about where that pain is that you have, share that pain with us and let us figure out a workflow for you. Let us figure out who we can get on to talk about how they've solved that, so that we can all get better together. That is what Advocacy Help Desk is all about. We thank you for watching today. Tommy, thank you for coming on. Brian, thank you for your partnership in this. And until next time, keep advocating, advocate differently, but be safe.